It was an ordinary evening at the diner, the kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee always lingered in the air and the sound of plates clinking against each other created a rhythm of its own. The little restaurant sat at the edge of town, away from the busy city lights. Its neon sign buzzed softly, glowing against the evening sky, welcoming anyone who wanted a warm meal and a kind smile. Danielle, the waitress, had been working since the afternoon. She was used to long shifts, and although her feet often ached by the end of the night, she never let it show. She carried herself with a quiet strength, moving gracefully between the tables, balancing trays with ease. Her co-workers admired her because she always found a way to stay calm, even when the diner got crowded or when customers were impatient. She had a gentle way of speaking, soft but steady, and people naturally felt comfortable around her. That night, Danielle tied her apron a little tighter, tucked a pen behind her ear, and walked out to greet the small crowd of customers. A group of truck drivers sat near the window, talking loudly about the roads they had just traveled. A young couple leaned close to each other in a corner booth, sharing a milkshake. At the counter, an older man sat alone, flipping through a newspaper. And in the farthest booth, near the back, a man in a tailored suit sat quietly, sipping black coffee. He seemed different from the rest, calm, watchful, and slightly distant. Danielle had noticed him before, coming in once or twice a month. He never said much, but he always tipped generously. Danielle walked over to check on him. "Would you like a refill, sir?" she asked, her smile warm but professional. The man nodded. "Yes, thank you." His voice was quiet, deep, and polite. She poured his coffee, and for a moment their eyes met. He gave her a small nod, as if he appreciated something more than just the coffee, the way she spoke, perhaps, or the way she carried herself without any rush. Danielle didn't think much of it, though. She was used to customers being friendly. For her, this job wasn't just about serving food, it was about treating everyone with kindness. As she moved from table to table, Danielle thought about her life. She lived in a small apartment nearby with her younger sister, whom she cared for after their parents passed away. Money was always tight, but Danielle never complained. She worked extra shifts, saved every dollar she could, and dreamed of going back to school one day. Nursing had always been her goal, but for now, the diner was her world. The clock on the wall ticked slowly toward closing time. The yellow lights above the booths cast a warm glow, making the diner feel like a safe little bubble away from the outside world. Danielle brought plates of food to the truck drivers, burgers and fries steaming on heavy plates, and refilled the couple's milkshake with a smile. She laughed softly when the young man tried to sneak a fry from his girlfriend's plate, and she pretended not to notice. At the counter, she checked on the older man with the newspaper. "How's your pie?" she asked. "Best in town," he said, giving her a wink. Moments like these made Danielle's job feel less like work and more like being part of a small family. Each customer carried their own story, and somehow, for the short time they were in the diner, she was part of it. She liked that. But the man in the back booth, he remained a quiet mystery. He sat with his coffee, glancing occasionally out the window, as if deep in thought. His watch gleamed under the light when he reached for his cup, a watch far too expensive for a small-town diner. Danielle noticed details like that, but she never judged. People had their reasons for being where they were, and she treated everyone the same, no matter what they looked like or how much money they had. What Danielle didn't know was that this man wasn't just a quiet stranger. He was one of the wealthiest men in the state, a billionaire whose name appeared in magazines and business headlines. But here, in this little diner, he was simply another customer, blending into the background, observing the world around him without drawing attention. He watched Danielle with curiosity. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with quiet admiration. He noticed how she never lost her composure, how she treated each person with the same respect, whether they were truck drivers in dusty jackets or a polished businessman like himself. Her calmness wasn't just an act, it was part of who she was. And that, to him, was remarkable. The night moved along gently. Danielle hummed softly as she wiped down tables, her favorite song playing faintly from the old jukebox in the corner. Customers came and went, leaving tips on the counter and warm goodbyes behind them. Every so often, she caught the man in the suit watching the room with thoughtful eyes, as though he were studying not just the diner, but the people in it. Outside, the streets grew quieter. The hum of passing cars slowed, and the stars began to appear in the dark sky. Inside the diner, however, life carried on in its usual rhythm, forks against plates, laughter from the truck drivers, and the gentle clinking of cups. Danielle leaned against the counter for a brief moment, stretching her shoulders. She thought about the long day she had and how she still had laundry waiting at home. She also thought about her sister, probably curled up on the couch, waiting for her to return. But she didn't mind. This was her routine, and she carried it with pride. The man in the back booth finished his coffee, but instead of leaving right away, he stayed. He seemed content to simply sit there, watching, thinking. Danielle, too busy with her duties, didn't wonder why. But he had his reasons. For him, this diner offered something money couldn't buy: a glimpse into everyday life, into people who lived with sincerity and simplicity. And for some reason, he found himself drawn to the calm presence of the waitress who moved so gracefully through it all. The clock ticked closer to the hour, and the night seemed ready to wind down. Danielle gathered plates, wiped the counters, and prepared for closing. The customers began to leave one by one, their laughter fading into the night air. The diner grew quieter, more intimate. Only a handful of people remained inside, including the mysterious man who hadn't yet moved from his booth. He folded his hands on the table and took a slow breath, still watching. Something told him this night, in this little diner, would be unlike any other. And though Danielle had no idea, her calm presence was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The diner's warm glow was a comforting bubble against the chilly evening outside. The few remaining customers were finishing their meals, chatting quietly, or scrolling on their phones. Danielle moved between tables with practiced ease, clearing plates and wiping counters. She hummed softly under her breath, enjoying the rhythm of her work. It was almost closing time, and she was already imagining the moment she could finally sit down, relax, and breathe. Suddenly, the front door opened with a sharp jingle. Danielle looked up and noticed two men walking in. They were dressed plainly, but there was a nervous energy about them, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The diner had been quiet all evening, and the sudden entrance of these strangers felt like a ripple in calm water. Danielle smiled politely, her voice calm and welcoming. "Good evening, gentlemen. How can I help you?" The taller one looked around the diner, his eyes darting from table to table. He didn't speak immediately. Danielle noticed that he seemed tense, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The shorter man, slightly younger, shuffled forward, glancing nervously at the floor and then at Danielle. "Just coffee," the taller man finally said. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was an edge to it that made Danielle pause for just a second. "Of course," she said, keeping her tone bright and friendly. She poured 2 cups of coffee, placing them carefully on a tray. Her movements were smooth and controlled, as if nothing about the situation had surprised her. The men accepted the coffee without saying much, their eyes scanning the diner as if they were searching for something. Danielle didn't panic. She had learned long ago that staying calm in tense situations was the best way to keep things under control. She continued her work, walking to the other tables and checking on the remaining customers. "Is everything all right over here?" she asked a small family finishing their dinner. "Yes, thank you," the father replied, his tone polite but a little tight. Danielle returned to the counter, pretending to rearrange napkins, all the while keeping an eye on the two men. She could sense their unease, but she didn't let it show that she was concerned. Inside, her mind raced, thinking about what could happen if things escalated. But outwardly, she remained calm, offering small smiles and nods, just as she had done countless times before. The man in the back booth, the billionaire, continued to watch silently. He noticed Danielle's poise immediately. While most people might have stiffened or tried to avoid eye contact, she moved as if nothing was wrong. She spoke gently to the other customers, ensuring they were comfortable and unaware of any potential threat. It was a subtle kind of bravery, quiet but unmistakable. As Danielle walked past the two men again, she noticed the shorter one fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket. He seemed nervous, unsure of how to act. Danielle's intuition told her that they were not simply here for a normal coffee run. But she didn't panic. Instead, she reminded herself to keep her voice steady, her gestures calm, and her mind clear. "Can I get you anything else?" Danielle asked politely, placing a fresh napkin on their table. "No, just coffee," the taller man said again, his voice slightly sharper this time. He shifted in his seat, looking around as if confirming that no one was watching him closely. Danielle nodded, retreating just enough to give them space while still keeping an eye on them from a distance. It was in that moment that Danielle realized something important. Her calmness wasn't just helping her, it was helping everyone else. The customers were relaxed, not noticing the tension building in the diner. Her voice, gentle and steady, was keeping the atmosphere from turning chaotic. Even the two men seemed slightly less anxious because she treated them normally, without fear or aggression. The shorter man muttered something under his breath, and the taller one leaned slightly forward, his posture tense. Danielle noticed the change immediately. She slowed her movements, placing a plate down carefully, then straightened and looked toward the other tables. Her eyes were soft but alert, showing no panic but readiness to act if needed. From his booth, the billionaire watched every small detail. He could see how Danielle had not only assessed the situation quickly but had also adapted her behavior to maintain calmness. Most people would have frozen, screamed, or made the situation worse. She, however, had become the quiet center of control. He felt a growing respect, mixed with awe, at how someone so young could handle such pressure with such grace. Danielle's mind moved quickly. She thought about what she could do to prevent anyone from feeling unsafe. Maybe if I asked them about their day, it might distract them, she thought. So, with a soft smile, she walked back toward the table. "Is everything going okay with your coffee?" she asked casually, keeping her tone light, friendly, and completely normal. The taller man glanced up, startled slightly by her calm demeanor. He nodded, muttering, "Yes, fine." "Good," Danielle replied, her voice steady. "Sometimes a warm drink is all you need to feel better." She moved to the next table but kept glancing back, carefully observing without making it obvious. The tension in the diner was subtle but growing. Danielle noticed the men exchanging quick whispers. She knew she had to keep her focus, not just for herself, but for the other customers. She walked by the booth again, this time placing a fresh sugar container and a small pitcher of cream on their table, her hands steady, her expression composed. Meanwhile, the billionaire in the corner continued to watch, impressed by the quiet strength Danielle displayed. He had seen powerful people in high-pressure situations before, but there was something genuine about her composure. It wasn't a performance, it was natural, instinctive. Danielle's calm behavior started to influence the two men, even though they didn't realize it. They slowed their movements, stopped fidgeting as much, and looked around less nervously. Her presence acted like a stabilizing force, allowing the energy in the diner to remain controlled. At the same time, Danielle subtly guided other customers. She leaned close to a small family finishing their meal and whispered, "Take your time, there's no rush." She smiled reassuringly at them. Her calmness was contagious, creating a sense of quiet safety that kept everyone from panicking. The minutes passed slowly, but Danielle's focus never wavered. She stayed attentive, making sure each movement was precise and deliberate. Every action, from refilling a cup to adjusting a napkin, was done with a quiet intention that maintained the peaceful atmosphere in the diner. Even the jukebox seemed to play along, its soft tunes filling the air without adding tension. Danielle allowed herself to breathe, just slightly, staying centered while observing every small detail around her. She could sense when the taller man shifted his weight, or when the shorter one glanced at the exit, considering options. Her awareness gave her an edge that no one else in the diner possessed at that moment. The billionaire finally stood, quietly moving closer to the scene, although he remained careful not to interfere. He wanted to see how far her calmness could go, and he already understood the answer: Danielle's presence was more powerful than anyone expected. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a steady force, keeping a potentially chaotic situation under control without a single harsh word or sudden movement. Danielle's mind raced through possibilities. She didn't overthink, instead, she focused on small, practical steps, maintaining her calm voice, keeping the customers reassured, and watching for any changes in the two men's behavior. Every choice was deliberate, thoughtful, and careful. She moved like water, flowing around potential problems rather than clashing with them. By now, even the two men were feeling some of the effect. They exchanged uncertain glances, noticing the lack of tension from the waitress and other customers. Their anxiety lessened, if only slightly, because the environment around them felt safe and controlled. Danielle had, without raising her voice or making demands, created a pocket of calm in an otherwise stressful moment. It was clear to the billionaire that this was no ordinary waitress. Her composure wasn't learned from a job, it came from experience, from life itself. He could sense the courage in her subtle movements, the quiet confidence in her voice, and the awareness that allowed her to see everything in the diner at once. As Danielle continued to move between tables, refilling drinks, and checking in with customers, she never stopped noticing the smallest details: the shifting weight of a chair, the nervous glance of the taller man, or the way the jukebox music softened a moment of tension. She had become the anchor in the diner, and everyone, whether they realized it or not, was holding on to her calmness as their own. Danielle continued moving through the diner, her steps quiet but deliberate. Every so often, she glanced toward the two men at the back, her eyes scanning for any change in their behavior. The taller one fidgeted slightly, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, while the shorter man kept glancing nervously at the exit, as if trying to decide what to do next. Danielle's intuition told her that they were tense, unsure, and perhaps scared themselves. But she didn't let that show. She spoke softly to other customers, refilled drinks, and cleared plates as though it were a normal night. The atmosphere in the diner had shifted. Before, it had been warm and calm, filled with the usual chatter and soft music. Now, a quiet tension lingered in the air, almost like a hidden layer beneath the everyday sounds. Danielle was aware of it, but she treated it as a challenge, not a threat. She reminded herself to stay steady, to breathe, and to focus on what she could control. The younger man, the shorter one, seemed to be struggling more than the taller. He shifted in his seat, biting his lip, and looked around as though searching for guidance. Danielle noticed his hesitation. She knew that if she could speak gently and calmly, perhaps she could help him feel less panicked. Walking over, she placed a small pitcher of cream on their table. "Here you go," she said softly, her voice warm. "Take your time, okay? No rush at all." The taller man looked up sharply, almost surprised that she was talking to him with such calm confidence. He nodded, muttering a quiet thanks, while the younger one didn't even look up, still fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. Danielle stepped back just enough to give them space, but she stayed attentive. She moved toward the other tables, checking on customers, smiling politely, and keeping the tone of the diner as ordinary as possible. She had learned from life that sometimes, small gestures of kindness could calm people more than words ever could. The billionaire in the back booth watched her with growing admiration. He had seen people in high-pressure situations before, executives and leaders who made decisions under stress, but Danielle's composure was different. It wasn't forced, it wasn't dramatic, it was real. She was confident without being loud, aware without being aggressive. Her presence was a quiet force that seemed to influence everyone in the diner, even the two nervous men. Danielle noticed something subtle, a change in the shorter man's behavior. His hands stopped shaking slightly, and he looked around less nervously. He wasn't completely calm yet, but her presence seemed to have a stabilizing effect. She realized then that staying calm herself was not just protecting her, it was helping everyone else. She moved closer again, this time speaking to the younger man in a very gentle voice. "Everything's okay," she said quietly, with a reassuring smile. "No one's going to get hurt. Just take a deep breath and relax for a moment." The man glanced up at her, startled that someone was speaking so calmly to him. Danielle didn't press further, she simply smiled and returned to the counter, where she straightened napkins and organized utensils. Her movements were careful and deliberate, showing control and confidence without confrontation. Meanwhile, the taller man seemed to relax slightly as well. He adjusted his posture, leaning back in his chair, his breathing slowing just a little. Danielle realized that by treating them normally, without panic or judgment, she was creating a sense of trust. Even in a situation that could have caused fear or chaos, her composure was contagious. The other customers, too, began to sense the calm energy. A small family finishing their meal looked up at her with quiet reassurance. Danielle smiled at them softly, placing a napkin gently on their table. Her eyes met theirs for a brief moment, and they nodded, understanding without words that everything would be fine. The billionaire, observing from his booth, leaned forward slightly. He was impressed by how Danielle handled the situation with such precision. Most people would have panicked, shouted, or frozen. She had done none of that. Instead, she had become a stabilizing center, guiding everyone around her through subtle actions and soft words. Danielle's mind was alert. She thought about what might happen next and how she could maintain calm. She didn't consider fear, she considered solutions. She knew that the younger man's nervous energy was the key. If she could help him feel more secure, perhaps the tension would ease entirely. Walking over again, she spoke gently to him. "I know this isn't easy," she said, her voice calm and steady. "But it will be okay. Just breathe, and take a moment. Everything's fine." He looked at her, uncertainty still in his eyes, but something shifted. Her calmness seemed to reach him in a way no one else could. He relaxed just enough to sit back in his chair and unclench his hands. Danielle's eyes met the taller man's briefly, and she gave a small, understanding nod. Both men seemed to sense that she was not judging them, not threatening them, just treating them with basic human kindness. The atmosphere in the diner changed again, subtly but noticeably. The air seemed lighter, the tension less sharp. Danielle continued her work, refilling drinks, checking tables, and smiling politely. Her calm presence allowed everyone in the diner to focus on the ordinary tasks of finishing a meal, talking quietly, and simply being in a safe space. Even the jukebox music seemed softer, as if the world itself recognized her quiet influence. Danielle's steps were measured, her tone gentle, and every action deliberate. She had learned that when fear arises, people respond not only to words but to energy. Her energy was calm, stable, and reassuring. The billionaire could see it clearly. He had never seen anything quite like it. She was not simply a waitress performing a job, she was a leader in a moment of crisis, guiding people through presence alone. Her quiet courage was extraordinary, and he realized that he was witnessing something rare, true composure under pressure. Danielle didn't think about fame, recognition, or reward. She thought only about the people in the diner. She considered how each person was feeling, how she could ease their anxiety, and how she could maintain control without causing alarm. Her mind was clear, her body steady, and her heart patient. Time seemed to stretch. Every glance, every movement, every subtle interaction mattered. Danielle's calm voice, soft gestures, and steady movements influenced not only the nervous men but also the customers who had remained seated. They could feel that someone was looking out for them, guiding them through the situation without fear or panic. Then something remarkable happened. The younger man, after a long pause, spoke softly, almost to himself. I didn't mean for this to happen. Danielle didn't flinch. She continued her work, pretending to straighten a napkin, but her ears were alert. She responded quietly, gently. I understand. It's okay. Let's just take a moment, breathe, and everything will be fine. Her words had an effect. The taller man's shoulders relaxed, and the shorter man seemed to gather courage. Danielle's calmness had created a ripple, spreading through everyone in the diner, including the two men who had come in anxious and unsure. Her presence had transformed the energy in the room. The billionaire in the corner smiled slightly. He could see it clearly now. Danielle had turned a potentially stressful situation into a controlled, manageable moment without raising her voice or making anyone uncomfortable. She had done it all with patience, awareness, and a quiet strength that demanded attention without demanding compliance. Danielle moved to the counter again, her back straight, her hands steady. She glanced at the clock. Closing time was near. She continued to perform her duties as usual, checking on tables, refilling drinks, and offering smiles. Every step, every gesture, was purposeful, maintaining calm in a way that few people could achieve. The two men shifted again, this time more noticeably. They spoke quietly between themselves, no longer tense, no longer panicked. Danielle watched subtly, her focus never wavering. She realized that her calm demeanor had given them a chance to regain composure, to make better decisions without feeling rushed or judged. For the first time since they entered the diner, the two men seemed human again, not strangers causing tension, but people caught in an unusual moment, guided by the presence of someone who understood the power of calmness. The diner, once again, felt safe. Danielle had transformed the environment not through authority or force, but through awareness, kindness, and quiet courage. The customers, unaware of how close the tension had come, continued their meals peacefully, comforted by the warmth of the room and the presence of the extraordinary waitress moving among them. The diner had settled into a quiet rhythm. The few remaining customers were finishing their meals, speaking in soft tones, their attention on plates and conversations rather than the unusual tension that had filled the room earlier. Danielle continued her careful movements, gliding between tables with the practiced ease of someone who had done this countless times, though tonight's events felt far from ordinary. Her eyes continually flicked toward the two men who had entered earlier. The taller one was leaning back slightly in his chair, his hands folded loosely on the table, while the shorter one seemed to be thinking carefully, weighing his next move. Danielle knew that patience was now the key. She didn't rush, didn't speak more than necessary, and allowed the calm energy she carried to fill the room. From his corner booth, the billionaire continued to observe. He was fascinated not only by her bravery but also by her intelligence. Danielle was reading every micro-expression, every shift in body language, and responding without panic or hesitation. She had created a safe bubble in the diner, a place where even the most nervous person could feel just a little more at ease. The shorter man finally spoke in a quiet, hesitant voice. We didn't mean any trouble," he said, almost whispering. Danielle nodded gently, keeping her voice calm and kind. "I understand. Let's just focus on making sure everyone is safe and comfortable, okay?" There's no need to worry. Her words were soft, but they carried authority without harshness. It was clear to everyone in the diner that Danielle was the one guiding the situation. Customers who had initially felt anxious now found themselves subconsciously following her lead, breathing a little easier, glancing around less nervously, and feeling safe. The taller man shifted in his chair, glancing at his companion. He spoke in a low tone, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Maybe we should just go." Danielle caught the movement of his eyes and the slight tension leaving his shoulders. She didn't move toward them, didn't speak, but her calm presence alone encouraged them to take a more positive step. She returned to the counter, smiling softly at another customer, pretending as if nothing unusual was happening, yet keeping every ounce of her attention on the two men. The younger man hesitated, looking around the diner, and then slowly, carefully, he nodded to his companion. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, but it spoke volumes. Danielle saw it and understood immediately. He was responding to her energy, trusting her calm guidance even without fully knowing her. At that moment, the atmosphere in the diner shifted almost imperceptibly. The nervous tension that had gripped the room earlier began to lift. Customers were no longer whispering nervously, the air was lighter, almost filled with relief. Danielle's calm had worked its way through the room, touching everyone subtly yet profoundly. The billionaire, still seated quietly, felt a deep admiration. He had never seen someone influence a room in such a gentle yet powerful way. He realized that Danielle's strength came not from words or force, but from her awareness, patience, and emotional intelligence. She was extraordinary, and he knew it. Danielle took a slow, steady breath and moved again toward the two men, placing a small napkin holder on their table. Her movements were careful, her smile soft but reassuring. "Take your time," she said quietly. "Everything's okay." The shorter man looked up at her, and for the first time, he seemed to relax. His shoulders dropped slightly, and his eyes softened. He realized that she wasn't judging, wasn't angry, and wasn't afraid. Her composure gave him a sense of safety that he hadn't expected to feel. The taller man followed suit, shifting in his chair and letting out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. Danielle didn't make a big deal of it, she simply continued her work, checking on other tables, wiping counters, and refilling drinks with smooth, deliberate motions. Slowly, the two men stood. There was no sudden movement, no harsh gestures, just a quiet, deliberate choice. They looked at each other, nodded slightly, and then made their way toward the exit. Danielle's calm presence had guided them to this moment. She had maintained safety not through confrontation but through quiet influence, allowing them to make the right choice on their own. As the men reached the door, they paused briefly. Danielle offered them a small, reassuring smile. It was a gesture of understanding and kindness, letting them know that they could leave without fear of judgment or anger. The taller man nodded, muttering a quiet thank you, and then both stepped outside, disappearing into the night. The tension that had hung over the diner like a cloud was gone. The remaining customers breathed more easily, some exchanging quiet smiles and whispered compliments to Danielle for her composure. She continued her work, finishing closing tasks, her movements deliberate but relaxed, aware that the moment had passed and peace had returned. The billionaire finally stood from his booth. He had remained quiet throughout, letting Danielle guide the room without interference. Now, he walked slowly toward the counter, his eyes filled with admiration. Danielle looked up, still calm, still smiling, and he extended a hand. "You handled that beautifully," he said quietly, his tone sincere. "I've never seen anything like it." Danielle blinked, slightly surprised by the praise. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just stayed calm. That's all." He shook his head, smiling. "It's more than that. You have a presence, a way of influencing people without even trying. That's rare." Danielle's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment. She had always believed in staying composed and treating people with kindness, but she never imagined it would be noticed by someone so powerful. The diner had returned to its ordinary rhythm. The small family at the corner booth finished their meal and waved goodbye. The truck drivers had left, leaving only the soft hum of the jukebox and the gentle clinking of dishes. Danielle continued to clean, organize, and prepare for closing, her mind still replaying the events of the evening. For a moment, she allowed herself a deep breath, letting the adrenaline that had kept her alert finally ease. She realized how close the diner had come to an extraordinary moment and how much her calm had shaped the outcome. She felt proud, not just for herself, but for everyone in the diner who had been able to stay safe and composed. The billionaire stayed a moment longer, watching her work. He could see the dedication, the focus, and the kindness she carried into every action. It was clear to him that Danielle was not just a remarkable waitress but someone whose character and intelligence extended far beyond the job she performed. Finally, he spoke again. "Would you mind if we talked for a few minutes? I'd like to know more about you." Danielle paused, her hands stilling on the counter. She nodded politely. "Of course," she said. He pulled out a chair and sat down at the counter, and Danielle stood beside him. They began to talk quietly, not about the events that had just occurred, but about her life, her goals, and her dreams. Danielle spoke of her younger sister, of her plans to continue her education, and of her desire to help others through nursing. The billionaire listened intently, clearly impressed by her determination and humility. As they spoke, Danielle realized something important. The evening had changed her life, not because of fear or danger, but because of her own strength and composure. She had faced a challenging situation and had remained calm, guiding others through it with patience and kindness. And now, that same strength was opening a new door for her future. The diner had returned to its quiet, comforting state, but something intangible had shifted. Danielle knew that this night would be remembered not just by her, but by the customers who had witnessed her calm in action, and by the billionaire who had seen her extraordinary character firsthand. By the time she finished closing the diner, Danielle felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had remained true to herself, maintained her composure, and influenced the world around her in a meaningful way. The night had tested her, but she had proven her strength and resilience. As the billionaire left, he gave her one last nod of admiration. "You've done something remarkable tonight," he said. "Don't forget it." Danielle smiled, feeling a quiet pride that was warm and steady. She had faced the night with courage, kindness, and calmness, and in doing so, she had touched the lives of everyone in the diner. It was a moment she would never forget, and one that would shape the path ahead in ways she could not yet imagine.